Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Welcome to today's Accounting Technology Lab on AI and privacy regulations. Now, we had recorded a prior podcast in the Accounting Technology Lab on software licensing and privacy policies. It's a lengthy record, but if you will take a listen there, we think you'll gain some additional knowledge on privacy and why we were talking about that. But Brian, I think this might be a good time to pick up on the AI laws and regulations that are out there, because you and I have been following these for, a good number of months. What do our listeners need to know about?
So AI is again, a hot topic that people are talking about, but you need to know that there are some very specific regulations that exist, and the regulations are evolving very rapidly related to this. So the EU has its Artificial Intelligence Act. The big one that we've really looked at is President Biden's executive order number 14110 that came out at the end of October of 23. It actually is going to start driving some rulemaking. It already is driving some rulemaking in many of the government agencies. We have the AI Safety Institute that's now part of NIST, the National Institutes of Standards of Technology. That again, NIST is a part of the Department of Commerce, and it comes out with the standards that the federal government has to comply with, related to computer security and IT and many other things like that. Now, you may be subject to those rules, however. If you do work for the federal government. So if you're a federal contractor or a healthcare provider or other things like that and get significant federal funds, you may actually be required to comply. NIST actually has an AI risk management framework that is optional now, but I think for certain people, it's going to be mandatory in the intermediate term. There is also a GAO document as well as a National AI Initiative Act. So a lot of stuff in here. Let's just kind of go through those in order. All right. So the first one is the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act. And so this, again, this was issued in response to things like ChatGPT. The idea behind this is that you classify things into four categories: unacceptable risk, high, limited, and minimal levels of risk. So there are certain things, again, that you have that you need to decide. And so with this, if you have unacceptable risks in apps are banned by statute. The high-risk apps have to comply with more rigorous requirements for security, transparency, and quality. Payroll would be a high-risk application, for example, because of all that data. Investment management would also be a high-risk thing. Limited risk apps only have transparency obligations to let people know what you're doing. And then the minimal risk apps are unregulated. Okay, but again, the general purpose AI has transparency requirements. And again, it has to be evaluated when the risks are above the limited level. Okay. And so go ahead, Randy.
Well, I was just going to mention you've covered the EU Artificial Intelligence Act, but I also want to mention the Bletchley Declaration from November 1st of 23, which was an agreement between the G7 nations as well. So the broad umbrella I was just trying to call out, Brian, is there's going to be global regulations on AI, and it's very much a moving target. So anything that we say in today's podcast could vary by tomorrow, and we understand that. But these big frameworks, we think, will be around for a while.
Yeah. Now, the tip of the spear right now on AI and regulation is currently what's going on with the president's executive order number 14110. And the reason this one is so important is that this is a 47 pages of excruciatingly boring memorandum. Okay, it's every bit as exciting as the Federal Register, but it drives it actually comes out with some new requirements, and it requires DoD, Energy, and HHS to all create regulations about AI models that might pose a serious risk to national security, infrastructure, or public health and safety. So think about things like big botnets running on cloud servers, or AI models that AI models that can be used to create biological weapons is a major concern that DoD and HHS are both concerned about. And so there's actually a lot of reporting on this. And so these AI models have to be evaluated by the government and have to have red team testing in here as well.
So Brian, are you trying to tell me that iRobot and Skynet, those movies, are coming to life here? What's going on?
I will tell you that, speaking of iRobot, one of the things that's a real concern for some people is that the Roomba put out by iRobot, which I know you were talking about the movie iRobot or the Asimov story, but I also mentioned, though, the Roomba here, because one of the things that they actually do with their AI is they gather and they have a map of where all the furniture is in your house, so that the Roomba can steer around it, and they retain that data on their servers. And so that's, again, if you think about it, if a bunch of crooks got a hold of that information, they could figure out how quickly to run through your house with that. And so I mention it to you here because I want you to know that sometimes there are devices like Internet of Things devices that can do things with your data that you might not think about.
Well, and others of us worry about things like military equipment that are given full autonomy, which the EU is against and the US government is absolutely for. And, I can give you all sorts of military equipment. It's not the point of today's podcast, but, military AI that has no human intervention just doesn't sit well with me, just like our data pimping, doesn't sit well with both of us. And so there's certain things that I worry about, whether it's rational or irrational, because I'm really looking for the good of all.
Yeah, you shouldn't have a death machine running around. I agree. Now I will tell you that since I live next to the Oak Ridge Reservation, where the U.S. stores all of its surplus highly enriched uranium, there are applications like that, and Kirtland Air Force Base where they store the nukes. That maybe in those contexts I can soften up a little bit, okay, on that. But again, that's only because I don't want to glow in the dark, Randy. So but I agree that again, we've got to evaluate these things because we don't want folks to be using AI to solve some of these problems. Now, there's some privacy provisions. It's short of GDPR and the Canadian Privacy Act, though. It does review data brokers, reviews how data brokers and commercially available data is used, and they're going to recommend privacy guidance. Okay, I suspect that this guidance will not be optional in the future. Through some rulemaking, and again, he's actually directed the federal agencies to evaluate the effectiveness of their privacy preserving techniques, and to again go through and identify some of these things.
And where we've taught GDPR in the past, the data brokers, in my mind, on the license agreements extend out to the privacy, again, to the sub-processors that we've talked about in other technology labs, and my naughty and nice list. Who's a good data broker? Who's a bad one? And, if you go back to the terminology that was being used with the unacceptable, high, limited, and minimal, there is no directory that we're aware of today that lists applications as being unacceptable, high, limited, or minimal. And we think it's going to have to get to that over time, just like in the banking community where we have vendor supplier approvals on a regular basis to make sure that they're not breaking into our banking systems.
Yeah, and one of the things I think about here is that when we talk about you're absolutely right to focus on those sub-processors, Randy, because I think it's critical for you to see whether when somebody is using an outside processor, are they actually processing the data, or are they just pimping it out? And that's the key that's a key thing to look at. Now, Commerce Department also is supposed to come out with best practices for detecting deep fakes, such as text, images, and sounds, which are not distinguishable from real text, images, or recordings. and there's some pretty interesting some of these on YouTube if you actually want to watch them. They have speeches that they have the text of speeches that President Obama gave being delivered by President Trump and vice versa. So they've swapped them out, and since there's enough video out there, they can create an AI model that looks like former President Obama or former President Trump, and then feed whatever language in it and have it deliver it the way they would say it. And so it's actually pretty amazing. In fact, I think at CES, Randy, you may want to talk about the model that was created of you.
Yeah, the Hollow AI chatbot is pretty stunning. They just updated that model here in the last couple of weeks of me. And, it took 45 seconds. And our rule right now is if there is 7 or 8 seconds of audio on you, they can reproduce your voice. So Brian and I know we're targets with this podcast because there's plenty of voice around us and plenty of video around us as well. So we also are following, though, the evolution of the big AI providers, Microsoft with Copilot, ChatGPT, Claude 3, Gemini, agreeing to start doing identification, if you will, basically marking these images as genuine or fake.
Yeah. Yeah, I just wish we could do that with news, but I guess, it's what are you going to do?
What are you going to do?
Yeah, so as we're looking at this, though, it also creates a cybersecurity program to develop AI tools to find and fix vulnerabilities in critical infrastructure. So they think terrorists could use AI to target critical infrastructure, increases government investment. Their actions to provide guidance to landlords, federal benefit programs, and federal contractors to avoid algorithmic discrimination and provide best practices in the criminal justice system. So again, this use of AI is going to make it easier for people to find out things that have historically not been private, or they've been private but have not been necessarily. They haven't been private, but they have been public but difficult to access. It will now be much easier to access that information, and so this. So again, they're targeting those things. Safety program to reduce harms and unsafe healthcare practices using AI. Transform education by creating resources to support educators with AI-enabled education tools and maximize benefits of AI for workers. So those are some of the major sections that are in this. Now, the important thing for you to know is that the regulations are going to start rolling out of HHS, DoD, and the Energy Department in the fairly near future. So you should expect those new regulations to be proposed in the fairly near future in the Federal Register. That come out of this effort, and so yes, even before the election. So we'll see how this all works out. Now, with this, there's also NIST also has a trustworthy AI risk management framework that you can use, which is a very good document. There is a playbook and glossary and a roadmap, and there are crosswalks, importantly here, to different standards and frameworks. So if you want to map, their AI risk management framework against other regulations, they actually have a crosswalk that does this. So if you're trying to figure these things out, and again, if you have regulatory compliance things, that's something to consider. This video is called Introduction to the NIST AI Risk Management Framework. It's on YouTube. It is 6 minutes, and it is a great kind of summary of things. Now, this was actually issued in January of 2023. It is voluntary but not mandatory, but we expect that it may change in the near future. It tries to incorporate 4 major things: governance structures and policies, AI-related risks, measuring things and quantifying, evaluating risks, and managing things. And so the idea is that we're trying to, again, evaluate all of those. So here is their roadmap that they have of what's involved in it. It's just kind of a nice diagram. I kind of like it. There is also a risk management framework playbook. Okay. And so these are tools. These are some free tools that will help you implement this should you want to. So it has checklists and suggestions and other items like that. And again, it is similar to other risk management frameworks like the ones from COSO, COBIT, that's from ISACA, and many others out there. Now, as we consider the potential harms from AI systems, these are the things that again that this particular document's focused on. Again, harm to individuals, to groups and communities, and to society, depending on different things, harms to organizations, and harms to ecosystems. So they've actually listed out quite a few different things there. And Randy, what comments would you just say generally about these laws and regulations at this point?
Well, Brian, I think you've got the basic frameworks fairly tight. What I am concerned for our listeners is that the AI regulations are very nascent. They're exceptionally new. They're exceptionally variable. A lot of the regulators that are trying to set the frameworks don't even know what they're regulating in many cases. The interests of the AI developers are in many cases being advanced, maybe for additional sources of data as opposed to protection of data. We've only seen two providers who have, tried to create environments where they're protecting the data more. So if you go back to the OpenAI founder, basically what happened with the split, if you want to think of it that way, I believe it was Andrej Karpathy went off and said, we're going to, create a new, safer. So there's a few people trying to do those safer AI type of approaches, but it's a big deal as it turns out. So, I'm just going to return to a theme that we have talked with you about in AI for a year plus, and that is protecting your client data, not putting any personal information inside these AI models. The vendors are trying to get data to train their models. They're running short on that. And the amount of risk to you and your clients if you make that type of decision is high. We're not anti-AI. We think AI should be private and built into a lot of the systems. So that's kind of a long rant in answer to your question there, Brian.
But we'll do another episode on AI risk management to try to give you some overview on that. And so that'll be coming in the fairly near future.
Yeah. Okay. Well, your expertise is appreciated, and we appreciate all of you who have listened in again today, and we will talk to you again soon in another Accounting Technology Lab. Good day.
Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.